In less than 24 hours after Donald Trump signed the order slapping a 50% tariff on imported copper, the United States lost a staggering $4.2 billion. Copper prices on the COMEX exchange exploded 13% overnight, hitting a record $5.95 per pound. And that was only the opening shot. Canada, which supplies over 40% of America's refined copper, struck back almost instantly. Ottawa froze all export contracts, and giants like Teck Resources and Hudbay Minerals halted shipments into the American market. Canada's message was blunt. We can no longer rely on a trade partner that is unstable and unilaterally changes the rules of the game. With that, the market mood flipped on its head. Electronics makers, automakers, and construction companies across the United States plunged into a supply crisis not seen since wartime. Copper, once just a silent backbone of every wire, circuit board, and motor, was now the center of a Trump-triggered trade war. And this time, Americans weren't winning. They were paying. Through every car they drove, every home they built, every light bulb they switched on. The real question now is, how far can Trump's tariff gamble go before it collapses America's industrial base altogether? But before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel to help us beat the YouTube algorithm. Right after Donald Trump activated Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, calling copper a strategic metal critical to national security, the 50% tariff became official. It was set to take effect on August 1, 2025. This wasn't a small tweak. It was a sledgehammer to one of America's most fragile industrial lifelines. The results were immediate. Futures contracts in the U.S. jumped 13% in a single trading day, touching record highs of $5.64 to $5.69 per pound. Yet, bizarrely, copper prices in London actually dipped slightly, reflecting fears of declining U.S. demand. That created an unprecedented gap. U.S. copper was suddenly 25% more expensive than on the global market. This gap opened the door to arbitrage traders and exposed what many economists argue is the fatal flaw in Trump's protectionist logic. Within days, Canada's retaliation arrived. Ottawa announced it would diversify copper trade away from the U.S. and began courting buyers in Asia and Europe. Considering more than half of Canada's copper exports, 52% in 2023, had gone south of the border, this wasn't symbolic. It was a deliberate pivot. Mining firms in Quebec and British Columbia quickly reoriented their shipments. Instead of fueling American factories, they began redirecting supply chains to Japan, South Korea, and China. Trump's tariff had effectively handed Canada an excuse to accelerate its independence, and Canada seized it. Financial experts warned that if the price gap persists, the United States risks economic isolation, much like the Hoover era of the 1930s, when protectionist tariffs triggered global retaliation and a trade freeze. For U.S. industries, the outlook is grim. Rising copper costs are already pushing up prices across the auto sector, renewable energy, and telecoms. Inflationary pressure is mounting. And the uncomfortable truth is this: America cannot supply itself. In 2024, the United States imported 810,000 tons of refined copper. Over 40% of that came from Canada. Domestic refining capacity is weak and declining, with plants in Arizona and Texas shutting down in recent years. Trump's tariff didn't solve a shortage, it created a crisis. The market shock was felt globally. U.S. prices soared, LME prices dropped, and a huge transatlantic gap opened. Canada countered with precision, pivoting its trade away from Trump's tariffs. Analysts quickly warned that the U.S. was steering into a wall of supply chain chaos. Trump might have sold the policy as protecting America, but Canada's decisive move revealed the opposite. Canada held leverage, and Trump had overplayed his hand. Consider the numbers. Canada's copper and refined copper exports were worth $9.3 billion annually, the bulk of which flowed directly into the U.S. By freezing contracts, Ottawa wasn't just flexing, it was rewiring global trade flows. Within days, Teck Resources, Hudbay, and others shifted toward Asian customers. Canada's government doubled down with a $1.8 billion Canadian dollar investment plan to expand export infrastructure beyond North America. That number isn't trivial. It signals Canada's intent not to remain a passive supplier, but to rise as a strategic rival in the global metals chain. And this move wasn't made in panic. It was made with a plan. After Trump's tariffs, Canada redrew its trade map. Its copper exports no longer awaited clearance at U.S. ports, but instead sailed toward Asia's booming markets. Ottawa's strategy was clear: escape America's erratic tariff politics and build safer, more diverse relationships abroad. If this plan holds, the U.S. share of Canadian copper imports will collapse. America's refineries will struggle to find raw material, and every car, every power line, every electronic device in the US will carry the cost of Trump's tariff experiment. Canada, meanwhile, is carving itself a new role, not as a dependent supplier to the US, but as a strategic competitor shaping how copper is mined, refined, and distributed globally. And in this rivalry, Canada looks prepared. America does not. The fallout inside the US is already brutal. Each electric vehicle uses around 80 kilograms of copper. With prices surging, the production cost per EV jumped nearly $900. For companies like Tesla and Ford, this translates to millions in monthly losses. Several EV projects have already been delayed or shelved. Small manufacturers in states like Ohio and Indiana are drowning. Copper wire imports jumped 18% in cost, driving contracts overseas to cheaper suppliers in Vietnam and Thailand. Utility companies are no better off. Conductors and transformer cores made with copper have climbed 22 to 25% in price, forcing emergency requests for rate hikes. Consumers are staring at higher electricity bills. UBS estimates that US GDP could shrink by half a percentage point this quarter alone. The $4.2 billion Canada froze out of the U.S. supply chain is already mirrored in direct losses across American industries. This isn't just a statistic, it's a red flag. Construction companies report insulation material costs spiking. Automakers face shrinking profits, with GM admitting $1.1 billion in tariff-related losses already and bracing for more. Renewable energy projects are stalling. Telecom companies are cutting margins to stay alive. And while Trump insists tariffs are a path to self-reliance, the U.S. refining sector tells a different story. Domestic plants can only cover about 5% of demand. The rest must be imported. By walling off the border with tariffs, Trump has made copper both scarcer and more expensive. Analysts warn that the pain hasn't fully hit yet. Many U.S. businesses are still burning through old inventory, delaying the shock. But once those stockpiles run dry, the real cost will appear on balance sheets and on household bills. Every new home could become $17,000 to $22,000 more expensive to build. Electric vehicles could jump $3,000 to $6,000 per unit. Even wiring, light bulbs, and EV charging stations will carry hidden price hikes. What Trump billed as a strategy for national strength is shaping up as a self-inflicted wound. Meanwhile, Canada has stepped confidently into a new role. It isn't just exporting copper anymore. It's competing strategically in global supply chains Trump has weakened for America. So the question is simple. Is this really the great deal Trump promised? Or has he pushed the U.S. into economic isolation while Canada expands its global reach? Because when copper becomes the flashpoint of a trade war, it's not just about numbers. It's about who controls the lifeblood of modern economies. Trump's tariffs may have been meant to protect America, but for now, it looks like Canada is the one walking away stronger, while American industries and consumers pay the price. What do you think? Has Trump underestimated Canada's leverage in this trade war? Or is this just the first chapter in a longer, costlier battle? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss our latest political economy updates.